I was standing right at the front door of my daughter's place, trying to keep her life from collapsing, when she screamed at me, "Leave right now, or I am calling the police." Her voice shook with fury, and her eyes were icy, like I was some stranger instead of her father. I did not argue. I smiled, turned away, walked down the steps, and pulled out my phone to call a real estate agent. If they were determined to lose that house, I figured I might as well stop fighting it and help the process along. What I did next still surprises people when they hear it. Earlier that day, Evan's face had gone bright red as he slammed a credit report onto the break room table at his office. The impact made coffee splash out of his mug and soak into the scattered papers in front of us. Bank statements I had pulled from my coat pocket, printed reports that told a story he never meant for me to uncover. "Where did you even get this?" he snapped, his voice cracking like a kid who had just been caught lying. I stayed calm, using the same steady tone I used years ago when a construction site went sideways and everyone else started panicking. "The bank called my house by accident," I said. "They were asking about a late payment tied to Megan's address." I tapped one of the pages with my finger. $53,000, Evan. Gambling debt, and it is secured against my daughter's home. He stepped closer, invading my space. I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with nervous sweat. Above us, the fluorescent lights buzzed angrily, making the room feel tense and claustrophobic. "This is none of your business, old man," he muttered. "None of my business?" I spread the papers across the scarred tabletop. "My daughter is about to lose her house because you cannot stop betting online, and you are telling me it does not involve me?" Evan swiped his arm across the table. His flashy watch caught the harsh light as papers scattered and fluttered to the linoleum floor. "Stay out of it, Frank. I take care of my own problems." "Your problems?" I crouched down and carefully picked up each sheet, the same way I used to sort blueprints before a build. "These loans are attached to Megan's house, the house she believes is safe, the house she does not know you have been using as collateral." "She knows," he said quickly, but his voice shook. "Does she?" I stood up and looked him straight in the eye. "Does she know about the second mortgage? The home equity line of credit? The loan taken out against her retirement account?" He turned away and stared at the humming vending machine in the corner, his shoulders tight beneath his perfectly pressed shirt. "I am handling it. By borrowing even more?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot I had saved. "This application is for $30,000. Same house, same risk." He spun back toward me and tried to grab my phone. I pulled it out of reach, but not before I saw the look on his face. It was not just anger, it was fear, real, unmistakable fear. "You do not understand," he said, his voice losing strength. "I had a system. It was working." "Your system is about to leave my daughter homeless." "My daughter?" Evan laughed, but the sound was empty. "She is my wife, Frank. Has been for 3 years. You should probably remember that." I slid my phone back into my coat pocket. The break room felt smaller by the second. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the counter nearby, its bread curling at the edges. "I built that equity," I said quietly. 30 years of overtime. 30 years of skipping vacations, new clothes, and comfort just to keep that mortgage paid. I did not ask for help then, and I am not asking for your permission now. Evan grabbed his coffee mug, his knuckles white. "Stay out of this, or else what?" He slammed the mug onto the table hard enough to crack it. Coffee spread across the surface toward the papers I had just collected. Just stay out. I folded the damp documents and tucked them back into my coat. Evan stood there breathing heavily like he had just sprinted up a hill. The vending machine clicked off, leaving an awkward silence behind. "I am trying to help," I said. "I do not want your help." I nodded and headed for the door. He shouted something behind me about boundaries, about knowing my place. But I was already thinking ahead, already planning my next move. Megan would listen. She always had. She had to. My footsteps echoed through the empty hallway as I checked my watch. It was just past 4 in the afternoon. Megan would be home from her nursing shift soon, and Evan would not be back until after 7. That gave me plenty of time for a conversation that might save her house. Later, I sat in my car in her driveway as the engine ticked softly while cooling down. Through the front window, I could see the blue glow from the oversized television Evan had bought recently, the one that probably cost more than most people paid toward their mortgage in a month. I sat there, organizing my thoughts the way I used to organize project timelines. Step 1, show her the paperwork. Step 2, explain the danger. Step 3, help her figure out a way out. The front door opened before I could knock. Megan stood there with her phone pressed to her ear. "Mom, I will call you back," she said quickly. "Dad is here." She ended the call and gave me a careful smile, the kind she had worn ever since her wedding. "This is unexpected." "We need to talk," I said. Her smile wavered. She stepped aside and motioned toward the living room, where Evan's gaming setup took up nearly an entire corner. Controllers, cables, and empty energy drink cans cluttered the coffee table. The house smelled like expensive candles and something heavier beneath it. Stress, maybe? The kind that seeps into walls when money becomes a constant argument. "Do you want coffee?" she asked, already heading toward the kitchen. "This is serious, Megan." She paused at the doorway, resting her hand on the frame. "Okay, but I am making coffee anyway. My hands need something to do when you sound like that." I followed her into the kitchen and noticed the stack of unopened bills shoved behind the toaster. She deliberately avoided looking at them as she filled the coffee maker. Wedding photos covered the refrigerator, Evan smiling in every single one, his arm wrapped around her shoulders like a claim. "I found out about the gambling," I said. The coffee scoop slipped from her hand and clattered onto the counter. "What gambling?" I pulled out the documents and spread them across the island between us. Bank records, credit reports, loan applications, everyone signed by Evan, everyone tied to her address. $53,000 at least, I said, and he used your house to secure it. Her face drained of color, then flushed pink, then burned red as the truth started to sink in. "That cannot be true," Megan said, shaking her head hard, like she could physically knock the idea away. "It is all right here," I replied, pointing to one statement after another spread across the counter. "This home equity line for $15,000, a second mortgage for $30,000, and this one, no." She swept her arm across the island, sending the papers sliding and fluttering onto the tile floor. Evan would never do that. He would never put our house at risk. "Megan, please look at what you're throwing away." "They are fake," she snapped, spinning away from me and gripping the edge of the counter as if she needed it to stay upright. "You made these yourself." "Made them myself?" I crouched down and gathered the pages again, my hand steady, even though my chest felt tight. Why would I ever do something like that? Because you hate Evan, she shot back. You always have. You never wanted us together. Her voice climbed into that sharp, panicked tone she used when she felt trapped. You are trying to destroy my marriage. I am trying to keep you from losing your house. Our house is fine. She turned toward me again, tears shining in her eyes. We pay our bills. We have never missed a payment. That is because you do not see the payments you are not making, I said gently, lifting the printed gambling statements. $2,300 last month. $1,500 the month before. Where do you think that money is coming from? Megan clapped her hands over her ears. Stop! He has borrowed against everything you own, I continued, forcing myself to stay calm. Your car, your retirement account, your house. Stop! She lunged for her phone on the counter. Evan loves me. He would never hurt me like this. You are lying. I stood slowly, my knees stiff and aching. The kitchen suddenly felt delicate, like a movie set that could collapse if someone slammed a door. I am not lying to you. Do not call me that, she said sharply. Her fingers shook as she scrolled through her contacts. Do not call me that. Megan, get out. Her voice broke as the words came out. Get out of my house right now. Your house? I looked around at the expensive electronics, the unopened bills, the wedding photos where I was barely visible at the edges. The house I helped you buy? The one I co-signed for? Get out. She lifted the phone like it was a weapon. Get out, or I'm calling the police and telling them you are harassing us. Something cold and solid settled in my chest. I was not hurt anymore. That feeling had burned away somewhere between the coffee maker and her covering her ears. What replaced it was clear and sharp. I smiled. Megan blinked, thrown off by the expression. She had been ready for yelling or begging. Instead, I bent down and gathered the papers again, stacking them neatly, folding each one with the same careful precision I had used earlier in Evan's break room. I slid them into my jacket pocket. You are going to call the police, I said quietly. Yes, she answered, though doubt flickered across her face. On your father, I said, who is trying to keep your house from being taken. You are not trying to save anything, she said. You are trying to ruin my marriage. I walked toward the front door and paused at the kitchen entrance. Megan stood frozen behind me, clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I hope Evan is worth it, I said. He is, she replied immediately. I hope the house is too. I let myself out and walked slowly to my car. Through the front window, I saw Megan lift the phone to her ear. She was probably calling Evan, warning him about her unreasonable father and his so-called fake paperwork. The engine started smoothly, just like it always had. Dependable, predictable, everything my life used to feel like. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Megan standing behind the heavy curtains, watching. She looked small in that wide window, surrounded by all of Evan's purchases. My little girl, who used to help me balance the checkbook at the kitchen table, who once trusted me with everything. I drove home, slowly, already planning my next conversation. This one would be with someone who respected paperwork, someone who understood the legal significance of a co-signer's name on a loan. My house felt unnaturally silent when I stepped inside. I placed my keys into the small wooden bowl by the door, the one Megan had made in middle school woodshop, and walked through rooms that suddenly felt too big for one person. The coffee maker started up with its familiar, reliable gurgle. While it brewed, I stood at the sink and stared out at my small backyard garden. February in Florida meant the citrus trees were heavy with fruit, oranges I would probably eat alone. Everything I had built here, everything I had maintained, suddenly felt empty, like finishing a structure only to learn the occupants had vanished without warning. I poured the coffee black, the way I had learned to drink it decades ago when cream was a luxury we skipped to make mortgage payments. I carried the mug into the living room, sat down in the recliner that had once belonged to my father, and let the memories come. 1994. Megan was 7 years old, missing a front tooth, full of questions about why her dad worked so many nights. That was the year I took a second job at a concrete plant, mixing foundations until my back screamed and my hands cracked from lime dust. 12-hour days at the engineering firm, then another 6 hours pouring concrete. 18 hours a day, all so I could send the mortgage payment 3 days early every single month. "Why do you always pay extra, Dad?" Megan had asked once, sitting on my lap while I filled out the payment slip by hand. Her finger traced the numbers I had written, always $50 more than required. "Because the bank charges interest every month," I explained. "If we pay down the principal faster, we save money in the long run." She nodded seriously, as if she understood compound interest at 7 years old. "So we own the house sooner?" "That is right," I told her. "Then it is really ours." The memory tasted bitter now, mixed with strong coffee and 3 decades of irony. I had pinched every penny, calculated every extra payment, believing I was protecting her future, teaching her what ownership meant, what equity was worth. I remembered the year the water heater failed and we could not afford a vacation. Megan cried about missing her class trip to Disney World while I spent our saved money on plumbing repairs. "It is our house," I told her then. "When you own something, you take care of it." Somewhere between wedding dress fittings and Evan's promises, that lesson had disappeared. The late nights, the peanut butter dinners so she could have fresh fruit, the overtime that paid for her college, her car, her wedding, all of it forgotten. Evan had never worked overtime a day in his life. He had never calculated a mortgage payment by hand, never balanced a checkbook, never chosen between groceries and gas. And yet he was gambling away everything I had spent a lifetime building. Evan lived as if money simply appeared whenever he needed it, as if consequences were vague ideas meant for other people, and Megan had chosen that world instead of the one I had built. By the time I came back to the present, my coffee had gone cold. I set the mug down on the side table beside a framed photo of Megan on her high school graduation day. She had been glowing in that picture, proud and excited, already talking about starting college without debt, because her overly careful father had been saving and planning since she was a little girl. "I did everything for her," I said out loud, my voice sounding unfamiliar in the quiet house. But that was not entirely true anymore. Not now. She had made her choice the moment she told me to leave, the moment she believed Evan's lies instead of the documents in my hands, the moment she threatened to call the police on her own father. Now I had a decision of my own to make. I could walk away. I could let Evan's gambling habit burn everything down. I could watch them lose the house I had worked 18-hour days to secure. I could allow 30 years of sacrifice to vanish because my daughter preferred comforting lies over painful facts, or I could fight. Not as a father trying to rescue an ungrateful child, not as a future grandfather worrying about grandchildren who might never exist. Those reasons had died right there in Megan's kitchen when she covered her ears and called me a liar. I could fight as someone who had been taken advantage of, as someone whose decades of equity were about to be fed into Evan's online poker addiction, as someone who had been dismissed, disrespected, and told his voice no longer mattered. The house around me made small, settling sounds, quiet creaks and sighs. Everything here was paid for, maintained, organized. It was proof that steady effort and long-term planning actually worked. Evan's approach was the opposite. Borrow against tomorrow, to fund today's impulses. It was time to see which philosophy survived real pressure. I stood up and stretched, muscles remembering years of hauling concrete bags and crawling under houses to inspect foundations. My body was older, but my mind still worked the same way it always had. Identify the problem, assess the resources, implement the solution. Evan and Megan believed they held all the power because they lived in the house. What they had forgotten were the documents I signed years ago, papers that made me more than just a meddling parent. I needed to review those documents. I needed to remind myself exactly what rights I had retained when I helped them buy their so-called dream home. My filing cabinet sat in the home office, waiting exactly where it always had. It was organized with the same precision I had once brought to construction projects. Somewhere in those drawers was the legal foundation for my next move. My system had saved me countless hours over the years. Everything was alphabetized, dated, and cross-referenced. Megan's house had its own thick hanging folder in the second drawer, stuffed with paperwork going all the way back to her original mortgage application. I pulled the folder out and spread its contents across my desk beneath the bright LED lamp I had installed the year before. With my reading glasses on, the paper snapped into sharp focus. Loan applications, credit reports from 2021, income verification forms, bank statements. And then I found it. Buried beneath Megan's employment history was the document I had been looking for, the original mortgage application. Both our signatures were at the bottom. Megan's careful handwriting next to my precise block lettering. But it was the section above our names that made me smile for the second time that day. Co-applicant, Frank Miller, Social Security number listed, relationship to primary applicant, father, co-signer, financial responsibility, joint and several liability for full loan amount. I leaned back in my leather desk chair, the same one I bought when I was promoted to supervisor 20 years earlier. Joint and several liability. Those words carried a level of legal force that Evan, for all his supposed financial cleverness, had clearly forgotten. The memory returned in perfect detail, March of 2021. Megan and Evan sat across from the loan officer at Gulf Coast Community Bank. Evan's work history had been inconsistent, 2 job changes in 3 years and a credit score hovering just above 600. Megan's income as a dental hygienist was steady, but limited. Together, they qualified for maybe $200,000. The house Megan wanted cost $340,000. "We are going to need a co-signer," the loan officer explained, tapping numbers into her calculator. "Someone with excellent credit and verified income to guarantee the full loan." Evan had shifted in his chair. "What exactly does that mean?" It means the co-signer becomes legally responsible for the debt if you default, she said calmly. They have the same rights and obligations as the primary borrowers. I remembered hesitating then. My risk assessment instincts had flared immediately. 40 years of stable employment, a credit score over 800, solid savings. Was I really willing to risk all of that for Evan? Then Megan had looked at me with the same expression she had worn since childhood. "Please, Dad," she said softly, "we will never miss a payment, I promise." "And you should understand," the loan officer continued, "that as a co-applicant, Mr. Miller, you retain legal standing in major decisions involving the property. Refinancing, home equity loans, or sale of the home would require your participation or consent." Evan nodded too quickly, eager to move past legal details and get to house shopping. Megan squeezed my hand, and I signed my name, believing I was helping my daughter secure her future. Now, 4 years later, with Evan's gambling debt stacked against the house without my knowledge, those details looked very different. I pulled out a magnifying glass and reread the fine print I had skimmed back in 2021. The language was dense and technical, but after decades of reading construction contracts, it did not intimidate me. One section stood out clearly. In the event of financial distress, default, or dispute regarding property use or disposal, all co-applicants retain equal legal standing to initiate protective measures, including but not limited to foreclosure proceedings, forced sale, or transfer of title. Forced sale. I set the document down and stared at my reflection in the dark window beside the desk. Evan and Megan could threaten to call the police on a father trying to help, but they could not ignore a legal co-owner who had just discovered his investment was being gambled away without his consent. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I had saved 3 years earlier, back when I helped Megan understand how property taxes actually worked. Richard Chen. He was a real estate attorney, the brother of the loan officer we had dealt with at the bank, and he specialized in family property disputes. Tomorrow, I would make some calls, not as a father trying to rescue an ungrateful daughter from her gambling husband, not as a man worrying about future family stability, as a co-owner protecting his investment. Evan believed he was clever, borrowing against property he never fully understood. Megan believed she could brush me aside because I was just her father, someone whose opinions could be ignored once they became inconvenient. They had both forgotten the most important rule I learned during decades in construction: always inspect the foundation before you build anything on top of it. And in this case, their foundation had my name written all over it. I carefully returned each document to its proper place in the folder, slid the folder back into its alphabetized slot, and closed the filing cabinet. Everything was organized. Everything was documented. Everything was ready. Phase 1 had been discovery and confrontation. Phase 2 had been an attempt at reason and reconciliation. Both had failed because Evan and Megan were acting on emotion and denial instead of facts and legal reality. Phase 3 would be different. Phase 3 would involve people who spoke the language of contracts, liens, and property law. People who did not cover their ears when faced with inconvenient truth. I switched off the desk lamp and left the office exactly as I liked it. Tomorrow would bring new conversations with new players. And for the first time since uncovering Evan's gambling debts, I felt something close to confidence. After all, I had spent my life building foundations. I knew how structures failed when their support was compromised. And Evan's house of cards was about to learn just how solid my foundation really was. I had barely settled into my evening routine when violent pounding shook my front door. 3 sharp knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Through the peephole, Evan's face looked flushed and warped by the glass. His expensive shirt was wrinkled as if he had been tugging at it in frustration. I opened the door slowly, keeping the chain latch firmly in place. "Good evening, Evan." "Open the door," he snapped, his voice carrying the same edge I had heard in the break room, only sharper now. Desperate. "It is open enough for conversation." He planted his palm against the doorframe and leaned toward the narrow gap. "Megan told me about your little visit, your fake paperwork, your conspiracy theories." "Did she mention the $53,000 in gambling debt?" His face went bright red. "Those are not gambling debts. They are investments. Cryptocurrency, digital assets, real estate opportunities. Online poker sites are not known for offering cryptocurrency portfolios," I replied calmly. He stepped back, then forward again, pacing like an animal testing its cage. "You have no idea what you're talking about, old man." I slipped my hand into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Evan's eyes followed every movement. "Should I call Megan?" I asked. "Invite her over so you can explain these investments directly?" "Do not you dare," he hissed, pointing a shaking finger through the gap. "You have already done enough damage to my marriage." "I have not done anything to your marriage," I said evenly. "Your gambling addiction is doing that all on its own." He slammed his palm against the door. "It is not an addiction. I have a system. I was making money until—" He stopped himself abruptly, jaw tightening. "Until what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Until nothing," he snapped. Then his tone shifted. "Listen, you need to stay out of our lives. Completely. No more surprise visits. No more fake bank statements. No more poisoning Megan's mind." "Or what?" His smile was thin and cold. "Or things could get unpleasant. Old men living alone, accidents happen." I studied him through the narrow opening. Sweat dotted his forehead despite the cool February air. His left hand tapped nervously against his leg, the same jittery rhythm I had seen in contractors who knew their bids had failed. "Are you threatening me, Evan?" "I am explaining reality," he said, leaning closer. I caught the sharp scent of alcohol beneath his cologne. "Megan and I are happy. We are managing our finances just fine. You are not needed, not wanted, and not welcome in our lives." "Interesting perspective. It is the only one that matters." He stepped back, straightened his shirt, and pointed once more. "Stay away from us, Frank. I mean it." I watched him walk to his car, a BMW I now knew he could not afford. The engine purred smoothly as he backed out of my driveway too fast, the tires squealing against the pavement. I closed the door, removed the chain, and locked the deadbolt. From the living room window, I watched his tail lights vanish around the corner. His visit had done the opposite of what he intended. Instead of intimidating me, it confirmed what I already knew. Legal action was my only remaining option. Evan was unraveling. The addiction he refused to admit was consuming not just his money, but his judgment, threatening a man in his own home, hinting at accidents. Those were not the actions of someone in control. I picked up my phone again and scrolled to the contact I had just reviewed earlier. Richard Chen. Tomorrow morning, I would begin turning discovery into action. Evan believed intimidation would silence me. He had forgotten that I spent 40 years dealing with men who promised the impossible, then threatened when reality caught up with them. The difference this time was simple. I held the legal cards, and unlike Evan, I knew exactly how to play them. Richard Chen's office occupied a corner suite in a glass building downtown, with market charts covering one wall and a view of the city's expanding skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood as I entered and offered a firm handshake, the same steady grip that had earned my trust years earlier. "Frank, it is good to see you," he said. "I am guessing this is not a social visit." "I need a current market analysis," I replied. I settled into the leather chair across from Richard's desk and slid the thick folder onto the polished surface. "This address," I said, tapping the cover. "I want a full comparative market analysis. Current conditions. No assumptions." Richard opened his laptop and started typing. "This is your daughter's property, correct? The one we reviewed tax assessments for a few years back?" "Yes," I said. His fingers paused briefly above the keyboard. "Everything all right with the family? Let us focus on the numbers first." He nodded without pushing, returning his attention to the screen. I watched him work, calm and methodical, the same disciplined approach that had earned my trust years earlier. Charts populated the display. Neighborhood comps, recent sales, appreciation curves. After about 20 minutes, he leaned back in his chair. "Given the current market, I would estimate 460,000, possibly 470 with the right buyer. This area has appreciated sharply since 2021. I pulled my pocket notebook from my jacket and wrote it down. Original purchase price was $340. "That tracks," he said. "Strong equity growth. Current mortgage balance should be around $280. $293, I replied. Plus another $53,000 Evan borrowed against the property. His expression stayed professional, but something shifted in his eyes. "Additional borrowing? A home equity line?" "Several," I said, "all secured by the house." "I see." He closed the laptop and leaned forward. "Frank, are we discussing a forced sale scenario?" "We are discussing a legal partition action," I said evenly. "I am a co-applicant on the original mortgage." Recognition crossed his face. Co-applicant rights. That changes the entire equation. He reopened the laptop and switched to new screens. Partition actions usually result in court-ordered sales. Timelines vary, but buyers know it is a motivated situation. Meaning faster pricing, he said. Likely 420 to 430. Still solid equity, just not top market. I ran the numbers in my head. 420 minus 293 on the primary mortgage, minus 53 in secondary debt, minus legal fees and commissions. Roughly 70,000 net. "Correct," Richard said. "Then divided according to ownership percentages." "That leads me to my next step." He slid a business card across the desk and wrote a number on the back. "That is my direct line. When you are ready to proceed, call me. Partition sales need careful handling." I shook his hand and left his office with a clear understanding of the financial reality. Next, I needed legal clarity. Donald Kessler's law office felt entirely different. Dark wood, heavy furniture, shelves lined with legal books that showed real wear instead of decoration. Donald himself was younger than I expected, mid-40s, with deliberate movements that came from years in courtrooms. Partition actions are rare in family cases, he said, after reviewing my paperwork. We usually see them between business partners or heirs. And the difference? I asked. Emotion, he said plainly. Business partners argue numbers. Family argues feelings. He spread the mortgage documents across the conference table. As a co-applicant, you have more authority than most people realize. You are not just guaranteeing debt. You are a legal co-owner, which means it means Evan and Megan cannot refinance, borrow further, or sell without your consent, he said. They already violated that with these loans. He pointed to specific clauses. Under Florida law, when co-owners cannot agree, partition by sale is the remedy. It forces a sale through court order and divides proceeds by ownership share. Timeline: 30 to 90 days, he replied. Depends on court scheduling and whether they contest. Filing starts a clock they cannot stop. I asked about costs, procedures, and possible delays. Donald answered each question carefully, thoroughly. One thing you should understand, he said as we wrapped up. Once this is filed, there is no undoing it. Your relationship with your daughter will not recover from this. I thought of Megan threatening to call the police, of Evan standing on my porch making vague threats, of 3 decades of sacrifice being treated like casino chips. I believe that relationship is already broken, I said. Donald nodded and began assembling paperwork. We will file first thing Monday morning. I drove home through afternoon traffic, my thoughts lining up like a job site schedule. Foundation assessed, legal research complete, professionals hired, permits ready, filings planned. Now came execution, the phase where planning met reality. Unlike construction, this project had a guaranteed outcome. Evan and Megan were about to learn that legal documents were not suggestions, and co-signers were not decorative signatures. Monday arrived gray and cold, a February morning that made Florida feel unfamiliar. I dressed carefully in my Navy suit, the one I wore to Megan's wedding, and tied the Father's Day tie she had given me last year. If this was court, I would dress for court. Donald met me in the courthouse parking lot, briefcase in hand, worn and heavy with experience. Ready? I have been ready since Friday. The courthouse steps rose in white stone, columns towering overhead, built to convey permanence and consequence. Inside, security processed a steady flow of people. Divorces, custody cases, civil disputes, criminal hearings. Every reason life ended up needing a judge. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor and walked past rows of courtroom doors. The clerk of court's office hummed with quiet purpose. Computers whirring, printers running, paperwork that would change lives being filed without ceremony. Final review, Donald said, spreading the petition on a small table. Partition by sale. You listed as plaintiff and co-owner. Evan and Megan named as defendants. Property address, legal description, liens, encumbrances. I read every page slowly. My name appeared again and again, not as father, not as helper, but as plaintiff. The filing fee is $450, Donald said, plus service of process for both parties. I wrote the check without hesitation. 40 years in the workforce had taught me one unshakable lesson. Some problems cannot be solved with conversation or good intentions. Some problems require financial and legal solutions. This path was far cheaper than standing by. While Evan gambled away 30 years of equity I had spent most of my adult life building. At the clerk's window, a woman who looked exhausted but kind handled our paperwork, with quiet professionalism. "Case number CV 2025-187, she said, stamping each document with an official seal. "Initial hearing is scheduled for March 15th at 9 in the morning, courtroom C." The sharp crack of the stamp sounded final, decisive. There would be no more family debates, no more emotional appeals, no more Evan's intimidation or Megan's denial. From this point forward, everything moved according to legal procedure, rules that could not be argued with, ignored, or bullied. "Service of process will be completed within 5 business days," the clerk continued. "The defendants will have 30 days from the date of service to file a response." Donald gathered the certified copies, receipts, and official notices. "That is it," he said. "The machinery is moving." We walked back through the courthouse halls, passing strangers beginning or ending their own legal battles. In the elevator, Donald outlined what came next. "They will be served by Friday," he said. "Then we wait for their response. Or, more likely, their panic." "What if they try to refinance or move the property?" I asked. "They cannot," he replied. "The notice of pending litigation we filed freezes everything. No transfers, no new loans, no changes until the court resolves this." Something settled in my chest then, not satisfaction exactly, but the calm that comes from preparation, like finishing a foundation pour and knowing it will cure correctly. In the parking lot, we shook hands. "I will call you once they are served," Donald said. "This part usually gets interesting." I drove home on surface streets instead of the highway, soft jazz playing on the radio, while I absorbed what had just happened. For the first time in weeks, Evan and Megan's reckless choices no longer had the power to affect me directly. From here on out, the legal system would do what it was designed to do. At home, I filed the certified copies inside the folder labeled with Megan's house, placing them neatly behind the original mortgage paperwork. Everything in order, everything documented, ready for whatever came next. My phone sat silent on the kitchen counter. It would not stay that way for long. I made coffee, lowered myself into my recliner, and waited. The next move was theirs, but the game was finally being played on my terms. The phone started ringing Thursday afternoon while I was finishing a late lunch. Megan's name lit up the screen. I watched the phone vibrate, then let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Evan this time. I carried the phone into the living room, picked up a book, and pretended to read while the device buzzed angrily on the side table. By evening, I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails. The first message was Megan. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Dad, please call me back. We got some papers today, and I do not understand what is happening. Please just call me." An hour later, Evan left his message. "What kind of game are you playing, old man? You think legal papers scare us? This is family business, not courtroom nonsense." The third voicemail was Megan again, crying now. "Dad, I am begging you. Evan says you are trying to take our house. That cannot be true. Please call me back. Please." I deleted all 3 messages without responding. Friday brought a flood of text messages. Evan started early. "This lawsuit is a joke. No judge is going to side with you against family." Megan's messages were longer, frantic. "Dad, I know we fought, but this is too far. Can we please work this out? I love you, but I love Evan too. Please do not make me choose." By evening, Evan's tone turned dark. "You're making a huge mistake, bigger than you realize." When Donald called to confirm that both defendants had been officially served, I showed him the messages. Standard reaction, he said. Panic, denial, then anger. What matters is whether they file a response before the deadline. And if they do not, then we get a default judgment, he said. The court grants our petition automatically. Saturday came with another wave of calls. I ignored them all and spent the day in my garden pruning citrus trees and preparing the soil for spring planting. Physical work cleared my head, and I needed that clarity. Sunday's voicemail from Megan was different, calmer, measured. Dad, Evan talked to a lawyer, she said. He says this partition thing is just a scare tactic, that you do not really want to sell the house. You just want attention. So we are not going to play along. We are ignoring this legal circus until you come to your senses. I listened to the message twice, then called Donald. They are not filing a response? He asked. Evan thinks it is a bluff. Donald laughed quietly. Perfect. That is exactly what we want. Monday morning arrived with silence. No calls, no texts, no voicemails. Evan and Megan had decided the legal system did not apply to them. They were convinced family dynamics overruled property law. I spent the morning organizing my files, preparing everything needed for a default ruling. Around noon, I drove to the courthouse and checked the public docket. No response filed. That evening, I called Richard to schedule the court-required appraisal. They are not contesting? He asked. They think it is a family argument, I said, not something they need to answer legally. Richard let out a low whistle. That is going to cost them close to $100,000 in equity. Tuesday brought one final voicemail from Evan. His voice lacked its earlier confidence. Look, Frank, maybe we all got heated. Why do not you come over for dinner this weekend? We can talk like family. I deleted the message and poured myself coffee. Outside my kitchen window, the citrus trees sagged under the weight of ripe fruit, oranges and grapefruits that had taken years of steady care to mature. Evan and Megan had made their choice. They believed legal documents were optional. They believed deadlines were suggestions. They believed property law did not apply to them. In 2 weeks, they would learn how wrong they were. By then, it would be far too late to anything. The legal process I had set in motion did not care about family emotions or last-minute pleas. It would continue forward no matter how loudly they argued or how desperately they tried to undo it. I had given them every chance to handle this responsibly. They chose gambling debts instead of honest discussion, intimidation instead of accountability, denial instead of legal reality. Now they would live with the consequences of those decisions, whether they accepted them or not. Donald called me Wednesday morning while I was outside watering my citrus trees. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice measured in that careful way attorneys use when the news is not comforting. Can you come by my office this afternoon? I arrived exactly at 2 o'clock and found him reviewing a thick folder. Partition cases can turn ugly, he said without easing into it, especially when defendants realize they are actually going to lose the property. Evan has already made threats, I replied. That is exactly what concerns me. Donald pulled several documents from the file and spread them across his desk. Property disputes involving gambling addiction follow patterns. First comes denial, then anger, then desperation. I scanned the pages. Police reports, restraining orders, incidents of vandalism and intimidation. You are saying I might be in physical danger. I am saying that staying in your current home while this unfolds may not be the safest choice. I had not seriously considered that before, but as Donald explained the risks, it made strategic sense. Evan was unraveling. His addiction was not only draining money, it was destroying judgment. Cornering desperate people rarely ended well. That evening, I drove through apartment complexes near downtown, looking for something temporary, month-to-month lease. Furnished, secure entry, close enough to the courthouse to stay informed without being visible. Palmetto Gardens checked every box. Clean, modest, coded entry, and a property manager who did not pry. "How long do you expect to stay?" she asked while processing my application. 2 to 3 months, I said, depending on how the legal process goes. She nodded and handed me keys to Unit 2B. Utilities included, parking space 47. Thursday night, I packed what mattered: 3 months of clothes, legal documents, personal essentials. Everything else stayed behind. The family photos on the mantel, the tools in my garage, the furniture accumulated over 4 decades of steady work. All of it could wait, assuming I chose to come back. Friday morning, I loaded my truck with 3 suitcases and a box of files. Before leaving, I walked through every room of my house. I checked the windows, adjusted the thermostat, locked everything down. In the kitchen, I stopped mail delivery and set forwarding to my new address. The house would sit empty, but protected, like a foundation waiting for the next phase. The apartment felt strange after 30 years in my own home. Neutral colors, generic furniture, no history attached to any corner, but it also felt safe, anonymous, removed from the emotional battlefield my family had created. I sat in the unfamiliar living room staring out at a parking lot instead of my garden and felt something I had not expected: relief. For the first time in weeks, my phone was not ringing with threats or emotional pressure. No one knew where I was except Donald and Richard, both bound by professional confidentiality. Evan and Megan could shout and scheme all they wanted. They would be shouting into an empty house. My truck keys rested on the counter in apartment 2B, ready for whatever came next. The legal process would move forward whether I slept there or somewhere else. Hearings would happen. Appraisals would be completed. Orders would be issued. The difference was that I could now watch it all from a place of safety and distance. Evan's addiction was his burden. Megan's denial was her decision. The consequences were no longer mine to carry daily. I unpacked my clothes into the small dresser, each folded item representing a conscious choice to protect my own well-being. For 40 years, I had been the dependable one, the fixer, the man who absorbed everyone else's problems. Now I was solving my own, and the solution felt unexpectedly freeing. From my apartment window, I could see the courthouse clock tower 6 blocks away. Exactly 1 week after I relocated Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Appraisal completed. Report filed with the court. Valuation aligns with projections." 20 minutes later, my phone began ringing. Megan's name flashed across the screen, then Evan's. I let both go to voicemail, made coffee, and waited. The messages told me everything. Megan first, her voice trembling. "Dad, someone came to our house today. A man with a clipboard and a camera. He measured everything and took pictures. He said it was court-ordered for a partition sale. Please call me. I am scared." Then Evan, barely containing his rage. "What kind of twisted game is this, Frank? You sent an appraiser to our house. The neighbors saw him. People are asking questions. You are humiliating us. Call me back now." I deleted both messages and opened my laptop. The court's electronic system showed the appraisal already uploaded. $437,000. Detailed photos, condition assessments. Professional, precise, devastating. My phone buzzed again. Text from Megan. "Dad, please just talk to us. We can fix this." Then Evan. "This has gone far enough. Call me now, or I am coming to your house." I smiled. He would find my place empty, the mailbox collecting forwarded mail he could not touch. The calls kept coming. 7 from Megan, 4 from Evan, each voicemail more frantic than the last. Megan. "Dad, I drove by your house. Your truck is gone. Where are you? Why will not you talk to me? I know you are angry, but this is too much." Evan. "You cannot hide forever. I found out the appraiser was hired by a law firm." I set the phone down and stared out the window at the courthouse clock tower. Time was no longer on their side. This is not over. By Friday morning, they finally uncovered the full scope of the legal filing. Evan's voicemail sounded nothing like his earlier threats. It was quieter, smaller, afraid. "I talked to a lawyer," he said, stumbling over his words. He says you can actually force us to sell the house, that we should have responded to the court papers. Frank, please, can we meet somewhere? Just talk? Figure this out." I spent that Friday afternoon in the courthouse law library, surrounded by shelves of bound volumes and silent study tables. There was comfort in the predictability of legal precedent. Case after case followed the same logic. Property law did not concern itself with emotions, broken relationships, or family drama. It dealt only in documentation, signatures, ownership shares, and procedure. Everything Evan and Megan had ignored. Saturday brought another wave of communication, emails this time since I no longer answered calls. From Megan's account, "Dad, I know you're angry. Maybe I was wrong to threaten calling the police. Maybe Evan borrowed too much money, but forcing us to sell our home, this will ruin our credit, our marriage, our future. Please do not do this." From Evan, "I admit I have a gambling problem. I will get help, counseling, Gamblers Anonymous, anything. Just stop the lawsuit. We can repay you over time." I forwarded both emails to Donald with a single line. "For the record." Sunday evening, my phone rang 15 times. I turned the ringer off and went to bed early. Monday morning brought movement. Richard called first. "We have interest," he said. 3 potential buyers already. All cash. Quick close. Forced sale pricing draws serious attention." "How strong?" I asked. "Highest offer is $425, about $10,000 under appraisal, but guaranteed 30-day closing." While he was speaking, my phone buzzed again. "Evan." I let it go to voicemail. This time, I could hear Megan crying faintly in the background. Evan sounded exhausted. "Frank, I know you can hear this. We drove around looking for your truck. Asked your neighbors if they knew where you went. No one knows anything. You just disappeared, like you planned all of this." There was a long pause. "We are going to lose the house, aren't we? The lawyer says it is too late. We missed the response window. 30 days. We have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." Another pause, heavier this time. "I am sorry. Megan is sorry too. We were wrong about the gambling, the threats, telling you to stay away. But please, please do not make us homeless. We are family. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Donald with a short note. Admission and acknowledgement. Family. That word mattered now that the consequences were unavoidable. It had not mattered when Megan covered her ears and called me a liar. It had not mattered when Evan threatened me in my own doorway. It had not mattered when 30 years of sacrifice became collateral for online gambling. The irony was complete and entirely useless. The process moved forward regardless. I made dinner in my temporary kitchen that night, watched the courthouse clock tower through my apartment window, and felt the quiet certainty that comes when planning produces results. The for sale sign went up Tuesday morning. I did not see it installed. I was at the bank depositing a small consulting check from my former employer. Richard sent photos instead. A professional sign. Multiple listing number. Motivated seller writer beneath it. We already have showings scheduled, he said. 2 cash buyers and 1 investment group. Pricing below market is working exactly as expected. I asked him to email the listing photos. My laptop filled with images of Megan's house. Their house, though legally, ownership was never as simple as they believed. Professional staging minimized personal touches. Evan's gaming equipment shoved aside. Megan's decorations neutralized. From the legal system's perspective, it had always been a commodity. Wednesday brought certified mail to my apartment, official notice of partition sale, timelines, buyer requirements, closing procedures, 30 days for occupants to vacate voluntarily, sheriff assistance afterward if needed. I forwarded everything to Donald and called him. Everything is proceeding normally, he said. They have not filed anything to contest or delay. That usually means acceptance or desperation. Possibly, he replied, but legally it does not change the outcome. Thursday afternoon, Richard called again. We accepted the cash offer, $425, 15-day closing, no contingencies. And my share? Approximately $78,000 after fees, commissions, and mortgage payoff. $78,000, not life-changing money, but fair compensation for 3 decades of payments on a house I never lived in. Justice delivered through contracts instead of manipulation. When do they have to be out? I asked. Closing is March 28th. Vacate by the 25th for walkthrough and key transfer. I marked the dates on my calendar. The feeling in my chest was not triumph exactly. It was the calm that comes when a complex project stays on schedule. Friday brought an unexpected development. Megan showed up at my old house. She sat on the front porch for nearly an hour. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called to tell me. She looked awful, she said gently. Crying. Kept checking her phone. I thought something terrible had happened. Something had, just not the kind Megan expected. She eventually left a note tucked under my front door and then drove away. I went by the house that evening and picked it up. The handwriting was Megan's, normally neat and careful, but this time the letter slanted and shook. Dad, I know you are avoiding us, but we are running out of time. We found an apartment, but we need first month's rent, last month a security deposit, and moving costs. Evan is trying to get a loan, but his credit is destroyed because of the gambling. Please, can we just talk? We are going to be homeless in 3 weeks. Your daughter, Megan. She signed it that way deliberately, as if reminding me who she was might undo court filings and signed orders. As if family sentiment could override contracts, deadlines, and judicial authority. It could not. I placed the note into my legal folder with the rest of the documentation and drove back to my apartment. The weekend passed quietly. My phone stayed silent. Evan and Megan had finally exhausted every attempt to reach me. Sunday evening, Richard called with final details. Closing is scheduled for Thursday, March 28th, 10 in the morning. Buyer's attorney, bank attorney, and myself will be present. You do not have to attend unless you want to. I will be there. Good, he said. Bring photo identification and your Social Security card. Everything else is handled. March 25th arrived gray and windy. From my apartment window, I saw moving trucks scattered through nearby streets. Late winter always brought relocations. I wondered whether Evan and Megan had secured their own truck, their new apartment, their temporary solution to the consequences they created. My phone did not ring. No final pleas, no last emotional appeals. They had accepted that the relationship we once had no longer existed, replaced by legal procedure they could not influence. Thursday morning, I put on my good suit, gathered my documents, and prepared to attend the closing that would officially end this chapter of my life. The system had worked exactly as Donald promised. Property disputes were resolved through process, not arguments. Justice was delivered through documentation, not emotion. By noon, I would receive a check that represented the validation of every lesson I tried to teach Megan about responsibility, consequences, and respect. Whether she had truly learned those lessons was uncertain, but the teaching phase was over. The closing took place in a sterile downtown conference room. Fluorescent lights hummed above stacks of paper, waiting for signatures. Proceeds to plaintiff Frank Miller, the bank attorney read, $78,437. I signed where indicated and watched 40 years of involvement reduced to digital transfers and official stamps. By noon, my phone buzzed with confirmation of the deposit. More money than I had seen in a single transaction since retirement. In the parking lot, Richard shook my hand. "Pleasure working with you, Frank." Donald was more concise. "Justice served." Back at my apartment, I found a voicemail waiting. It was Megan. "Dad, we moved out yesterday. Evan found a job in Jacksonville, so we are starting over there. I wanted you to know I understand now about the money, about the gambling, about why you did what you did. I am sorry it took losing the house for me to see it. I hope one day you can forgive us. I love you." I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. Understanding consequences was not the same as earning reconciliation. That weekend, I toured condominiums in a golf course community on the edge of town. Most of our residents are retired engineers, teachers, and managers, the sales agent explained. People who saved consistently, planned carefully, treated contracts as binding, not optional. People who understood that financial security came from discipline, not luck. I made an offer on a corner unit with a garden view. Evan and Megan were starting over in Jacksonville with damaged credit and expensive lessons. They had chosen threats and denial instead of accountability, assuming family ties protected them from consequences. They were wrong. Thursday afternoon, I walked through my new condominium, sunlight pouring in through windows overlooking the green. Soon, I would join the other retirees there, not as someone running from family responsibility, but as someone who had defended his legal rights after kindness was mistaken for weakness. Justice had been served, lessons had been delivered, and I had a new life to build, funded not by gambling or manipulation, but by principles carefully executed through proper legal channels. The foundation was solid. Construction could begin whenever I was ready.